Keepers podcast. I'm Jacoba, and I'm here with my co-host, Anita Voth. Today, we have a special guest, Anita Hunnersen, who is one of the daughters of Alice Hunnersen, who Small Hands, Big Worries, a childhood memoir was written about. Anita H. is here to talk to us about her mother's memoir. So, Anita Hunnersen, I've got two Anitas here today. So, to our listeners, if I fumble, please offer me a little bit of grace. Anita Hunnersen, welcome to our podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This is my first official podcast.
Yay!
I feel so advanced.
We feel very honored to have you. And I think what I'm going to do is just jump right in and maybe ask you the first question because you're here to kind of talk to us a little about your mom's memoir and your responses to that. So, my first question is tell us how you feel overall reading Alice's story.
I really enjoyed reading my mom's story. It was really interesting for me because I'm the youngest child in the family, and you know, I was able to get some clarity on what my mom's childhood actually was like. That wasn't in sort of a telephone manner, where it was like passed down through all the different siblings, and then I'm taking pieces from whoever, right? So, and I mean, we all have different memories and how we actually experienced what was happening. So it was nice to read it from my mom's mouth, essentially.
And
Yeah.
while you were reading it, did it bring up emotions for you in any certain parts?
Well, I think it just, if anything, it just kind of opened my eyes and gave me a little bit of perspective on like where my mom actually came from. Like I had heard little stories and little funny stories and not so funny stories, and it was good to like also understand like the chain of events because I had information, but I didn't have a timeline necessarily. So whenever I would talk to somebody about my mom's past, it's like I don't really know when exactly this happened, but so that was good. And the other emotion that sort of came up for me was a little bit of like sadness, to be honest with you, because um there was a lot of sadness there that I knew my mom had, but reading the memoir helped me kind of really understand where that came from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it helps us be almost more objective reading it like that because we think of our mom as this role of mom, right? Not as an individual with separate thoughts and feelings sometimes. And so reading it, you can kind of view her like, oh yeah, she was a person before me. Before
Yeah.
she was
And
my
it,
mom.
it and it was interesting too because it helped me to understand who she was and
Mhm.
why maybe she did the things she did as a parent and the choices she made in how she like supported us and raised us. And I kind of got the feeling that she wanted to do different than her parents because the story isn't the nicest of stories. I mean, there was happy moments and stuff, but yeah, it wasn't the greatest childhood, I would say. So
Yeah.
just to see like the comparison between generations even
Yeah.
was was really cool.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and I was going to ask you this question a little bit later on, but I'm going to go ahead now because I think it's a really good segue to it. And first of all, I just want our listeners to know that Alice Hunnersen's story, Small Hands, Big Worries, is a story that was compiled together from interviews with her, but it was published in this way after she already passed away. So this story was compiled kind of for her. And that's an interesting thing for people to understand because when we think of memoirs, we often think of writing them ourselves, but we can also write a memoir on behalf of other people. And that's sort of how Small Hands, Big Worries came to be. But let me segue into that other part there because I wanted to ask you about that, Anita. I wanted to ask you, like, knowing that Alice's life journey doesn't have a traditional happy ending, at least the portion of her life journey that this memoir was written about. How do you feel about that? How do you think she would have felt about that, about that sort of uncertain ending and not that, happiness thing that we sometimes kind of think every story needs?
Well, I think reading that part of her memoir made me want to know the rest,
Hmm.
like I wanted to hear more because I know that that wasn't the reality. And I also know in everybody's lives, there's um, valleys and mountaintops, right?
Yes.
So there was times I know in my mom's life that were very um, different from her childhood. Um, so that aspect of things. Sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought. What exactly are you asking me, Kara?
Well, let me ask it this way. Do you think that this was an important story to tell, regardless of the fact that it doesn't have the traditional happy ending? Do you think it's important for like your daughter to know these things and read them and to pass this part of Alice's legacy on?
Yeah, I think everybody has to tell their story, whether it's all good, all bad, a mix
Mhm.
of either things. Um, I even know for me, like lately, as I'm getting older and I'm
Yeah.
starting to think about my mortality and thinking back on my life, I'm like, wow, like there was so much that has happened. And, yeah, I'm 50, but there was like these phases of my life. Like I kind of think of them as chapters, right?
Yes.
And until you stop and think about them, it's kind of like you don't realize how much you've actually done or where your life has taken you or things that you've experienced, good
Hmm.
or bad.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there's chapters and I think it's important to put it down. And I think too, like what everybody likes to talk about their experience. I mean, I know if I had the opportunity to write down my life, even up until this point, I think I would jump at the chance because if looking towards my daughter Ellie, it's like, yeah, she's just getting bits and pieces as I did when I was a child, or even up
Yeah.
until our mom passed away.
Yeah.
um, so I'd like to have something written down that is almost like a reference and like to go back to, like almost like a familial Bible, like
Yeah.
just to go back and see, that, and oh yeah, that happened there, and oh, I didn't know that about my mom. Maybe that explains why she was like this, or
That's
why
right.
she made those choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, for
So
sure.
sometimes you can even look at your own life then and say, oh, my mom parented me this way because of that. And how did that affect me? Right. So sometimes
yeah,
it even helps put some of those things in perspective.
well, even like the part, Karen asked me to pick a part to read eventually on this podcast, and that kind of ties into the part I picked because um, it's the part where my mom's talking about, the when she started to have panic attacks, and the lead up to when she starts talking about that, you can kind of look back and go, oh yeah, that would kind of make me feel anxious too. And then I like started thinking, well, my mom was very big on like one letting us know about her mental health. It made me be aware that that was maybe something that I had to think about and that maybe I would be susceptible to as her daughter.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just gave me insight, and it was eye opening in a lot of ways.
Well, I've been, reading a little bit about and kind of, watching some podcasts and things about epigenetics, which is all about, the nervous system and how our we understand genes and DNA, and that part of our genetics, but a lot of us don't necessarily have an understanding that it's not just, the DNA that gets passed down. It's not just the traits, the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the height, whatever, the body type, the intelligence. It's also the nervous systems that carry on from generation to generation. So you are very much your mother's nervous system, or at least a very significant part of it. part of that. We all are. So you raise some really good points there. Not just should we be aware of these things, but also we really are a part of those things, you know, and that's why
Mhm.
these memoirs are so important, because when we can understand what came before us and why, it can really help us understand ourselves better.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you think about even when you go to the doctor and they're asking about your medical history, right?
Hmm.
And like sometimes I do guesswork. Like I know mom was sick at different times and don't exactly know what she was sick with because I was too young, right?
Yes.
So and families not being as enmeshed as they used to be, right?
Yeah.
Where people would reinforce those stories, or you could just ask a question in the moment. I mean, that wasn't really an option, or is becoming less of an option as time goes on.
Yeah,
But what I did notice is also in the doctor's office as of late, they do start asking you about mental health.
they do.
So it is good to know, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I just want to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to turn the reins over to Anita, because the other Anita, because I know
Yeah.
that she has some questions too. But I just felt this is a good place to ask this. And Anita Hunnersen, how do you feel that Alice, that your mom, would have felt about having her story put together in this way?
Well, I know that mom, Alice, had a lot to say and a lot to share and a lot of experiences that were unique. Um, I think uh, people listened to her. She had a lot of um, charisma, and I think she also knew the value in sharing the story,
Yeah,
and I can appreciate that, and I'm grateful.
that's wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah.
You've brought up a few times that you're the youngest in the family, and like, can you remind me how many kids are in the family, and what's the age difference from the oldest to the youngest?
Well, there's five of us. There's three girls and two boys, and I believe the difference is between me, the youngest, and my older brother is 8 years. I want to say, is that
Okay.
right, Karen?
Yeah, 7.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
we're all pretty close in age.
yeah, you are. But even still, I know the youngest often views what happened in the family much different than, say, the oldest, because the oldest lived through 7 more years of your mom's life, really,
Yeah.
than the youngest, right? So, did any of the things shared in the story, did they surprise you, or like were they new to you, things that you didn't know before?
I think I I knew the majority of the stuff. Like I said, I just didn't have like the context or the
Mm,
timeline of when stuff specifically happened.
right.
Um, I also, um, yeah, I was very cognizant when reading up, and I think I don't know how old the memoir goes to that was done because it wasn't her whole life. Um, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that me and my older brother, and even me and Karen, who is the second from the oldest, um, experienced my mom's life, my mom's mental health, my mom's physical health, my mom's parenting styles, everything differently. So, um, yeah, and just being older, their memories of things are different, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would really, really love it if the memoir kept on going.
Kept you
But
wanting
that would
more.
just be like, I
Part
think my mom
2.
would probably have never ending story to tell.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all do, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good reason. Maybe we can move to you reading a piece of your mom's memoir now, because I'm sure our audience would love to hear a little piece and want to know more as well. Do you have a few paragraphs that you've chosen to share with us?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to say that before I do that, something that I recognized in my mom's memoir, and
Yeah.
that is part of the beauty of what you guys do and your capabilities is that my mom did have a sense of humor, and the way that Karen managed to put that down on paper, like kind of came through because she used some of my mom's own words, and also there was some lightness in there, and she was sure to include those funny moments or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
so I could kind of say, yeah, my mom, that's my mom. My mom was giving the story, but
Yeah.
Karen made sure that that was conveyed in the memoir because, well, Karen knew who she was too.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring up my little thing. It's just a little paragraph.
Sure.
Um, the reason that I chose this one is because although my mom had times of great mental health, there was a lot of times where she didn't. And this part of her life in the memoir, Kara, did it go till like maybe till she was like 20 or something?
You mean the memoir as it's been put together now? Like
Yeah.
what timeline does it end? Yeah, she probably in her like mid-20s. So yeah, she was quite young when it ends.
So the paragraph I picked though is just kind of helped me understand like why her mental health wasn't
Hmm.
always at the best point. And my mom, did struggle with uh, panic and anxiety disorder.
Yeah,
So this just kind of sums it up when that started for her.
sure.
So
Agreed.
it says, at around 8 years old, I started having panic attacks. My heart would race, my breathing would be shallow, and I'd have intense headaches and stomach aches. I would be fretful and full of fears and worries, which elevated my emotional needs and caused me to attempt to cling to my parents. Instead of trying to understand or help me with what I was experiencing, my mother would shake me and yell at me to stop the nonsense. I can still hear my mother calling me blurbeak, which means loudmouth. She often pointed out that I was a whiny kid, and frankly, I probably was. She called me Sir Pete, meaning whiner. My father wasn't any help either. He just trivialized my fears by telling me it will be all over before you become a boy. It's kind of harsh, fair enough, but that was a very different world back then also, right?
Yeah.
But it just drove home to me why people end up coping the way they do, and it also, I could relate to that section because I've struggled with um my mental health at different times, and it gave me a feeling like I could relate to her
Yes.
That's
in that
Yes.
beautiful.
moment.
And I'll just wrap that up too, because I obviously knew Alice very intimately.
Yeah.
Um, compiling her story in that way and going through it, with the resources that we had with interviews and some of her own writings. It really helped me understand that what a lot of what she was experiencing was what we are now calling neurodivergence. So I
Mhm.
understand that Alice probably had ADHD or some other neurodivergent, tendencies, or I don't want to say personality disorders, but you know what I mean. And,
Mhm.
nowadays we are so much more accepting of them. But back in Alice's time, not only were parents not open to learning about that, they simply denied that any of that ever existed. And so I know that when Alice was a child and she was growing up, it was a very difficult world to navigate, especially, right after the war and going through all of those traumas and navigating life in a way that needs just weren't being met or even recognized. So it's interesting that you bring that up. We can know so much more about people's stories when we read them and when we seek to understand. So
And also I think society in general,
yeah,
because you see those patterns in growth where we have maybe dealt with like the computer age a little bit more, and being more accepting and open to differences.
mm,
It shows not only the history of our mom, but it shows the history of the last 80 years.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
And
Yeah,
I love also that it brings it to the present and helps us, like we talked about earlier, understand ourselves now
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and for future generations, right?
hmm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I work with a lot of older people just in my business, and the stories they could tell, You
Yeah.
know, I'm
Yeah.
highly interested in them and their wisdom and their experiences. It's almost like I wish they would all write a memoir before I started working with them so I could be like, this is who you are, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe there'll be a guest on Legacy Keepers, one day, or write a memoir with Daisy Chain Legacy Publishing. We're here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anita, for joining us today and sharing a little bit about your views on reading your mom's memoir. We really appreciate that. And to all of our viewers, it's Kare and Anita here, reminding you to keep your legacy alive.